Welcome to Rome in the year 107 CE, during the reign of Emperor Trajan, when the gladiatorial games have reached their peak of elaboration and popularity, when the great amphitheaters of the empire regularly host spectacles of combat that entertain hundreds of thousands of spectators, when the ludus, the gladiator training school, has evolved into a sophisticated institution for producing professional fighters who will face death for the entertainment of the masses. For the next few hours, we will explore how gladiators actually trained for arena combat, how these schools operated, what methods were used to transform slaves, criminals, and volunteers into skilled fighters, and what the daily reality was like for men whose profession was mortal combat. If you enjoy these detailed explorations of ancient practices and the reality behind popular spectacles, please like and subscribe to support our channel. Our story begins at the Ludus Magnus, the Great School, the largest and most prestigious gladiator training facility in Rome, located just east of the Colosseum, connected to the great amphitheater by an underground tunnel that allows gladiators to move from training ground to arena without passing through public streets. It is early morning, just after dawn, and the Ludus is coming to life. The facility is substantial, a complex of buildings surrounding a central training arena, housing perhaps 200 gladiators, along with their trainers, guards, physicians, and administrative staff. The complex includes barracks for gladiators, separate quarters for trainers and staff, an armory, a medical facility, kitchens, baths, and the training arena itself, a space approximately one-third the size of the Colosseum's arena floor, surrounded by covered galleries where spectators can watch training sessions. A gladiator named Marcus Attilius is waking in the barracks, rising from his narrow bed, little more than a wooden platform with a thin straw mattress, in the cell he shares with 3 other fighters. Marcus is 26 years old, a Murmillo-class gladiator who has fought in the arena 12 times and survived each bout. He is technically a slave, owned by the lanista, the trainer and manager who runs the ludus, having sold himself into gladiatorial servitude 5 years ago to escape debts he could not otherwise pay. This route into gladiatorial combat, voluntary enslavement by free men facing desperate circumstances, is more common than many people realize. While some gladiators are slaves assigned to this role by their owners, and others are condemned criminals sentenced to the arena, a substantial proportion are volunteers who have chosen this dangerous profession for various reasons: debt, poverty, the absence of other opportunities, or sometimes the lure of fame and prize money that successful gladiators can earn. Marcus rises, splashes water on his face from a basin near his bed, and dresses in the simple tunic that gladiators wear during training. Around him, the other occupants of the barracks are also stirring, perhaps 50 men housed in this section, fighters of various types and experience levels, all beginning another day of the rigorous training that dominates their lives. The barracks are austere, but not unbearable. Each cell houses 3 or 4 men, with adequate space for their beds and personal possessions. The cells open onto a central corridor, and the building has adequate ventilation through high windows. The conditions are considerably better than the dungeons where condemned criminals are held before execution, though far inferior to the accommodations of free citizens. As Marcus makes his way to the latrines, communal toilets in a separate building, he passes other gladiators, some of whom he knows well, others who are new to the ludus. There is a rough camaraderie among the fighters, men who share the unique circumstance of training to kill each other, who face the same brutal profession, who understand each other's fears and motivations in ways outsiders cannot. After using the latrine and washing at the public fountain in the training ground, Marcus joins the other gladiators assembling for the morning meal. Breakfast is served in a large dining hall, a simple but substantial meal of barley porridge, bread, and watered wine. The food is plain and monotonous, but nutritious and plentiful. The lanista ensures his gladiators are well fed because strong, healthy fighters command higher fees and win more bouts. The gladiators eat in their designated class groups. Marcus sits with the other Myrmilones, gladiators who fight with a straight sword and rectangular shield, wearing a distinctive crested helmet. At adjacent tables sit the Thraces with their curved swords and small shields, the Retiari, net fighters, with their specialized equipment, the Secutaries designed to fight the Retiari, and several other specialized types. This classification system is fundamental to gladiatorial combat. Gladiators are not simply fighters, but are trained in specific combat styles, each with its own weapons, armor, and tactics. The various types are deliberately designed to create interesting matchups: heavy armor versus light armor, long weapons versus short weapons, different tactical approaches that create spectacle and uncertainty about the outcome. As breakfast concludes, a trumpet sounds, the signal to assemble in the training arena. The gladiators file out of the dining hall and form up in their class groups on the sand of the practice ground. The sand here is real arena sand, maintained to match the surface they will fight on during actual games, allowing them to train in conditions as close as possible to combat reality. The doctores, the trainers who teach fighting techniques, stand before their assigned groups. Marcus's doctor is a former gladiator named Titus Flavius Crescens, a Murmillo who survived 23 arena fights before winning his freedom and taking a position training the next generation of fighters. Crescens is in his early 40s, scarred from numerous wounds, missing 2 fingers on his left hand from a particularly brutal fight, but still powerful and quick despite his age and injuries. Listen well, Crescens addresses his group of perhaps 20 Murmilones in various stages of training. Today we focus on defense against the Thrakes. The curved sword creates angles that our straight sword does not. The small shield allows more mobility than our scutum. You must understand these differences and adapt your tactics accordingly. This emphasis on understanding opponent types is crucial to gladiatorial training. Each class of gladiator has strengths and weaknesses, optimal tactics and vulnerabilities. Effective training requires learning not just your own fighting style, but also the characteristics of every type you might face in the arena. Crescens demonstrates defensive positions against a training partner wielding the Thracian Seeker, the distinctive curved sword of the Thrakes. He shows how the curve allows the weapon to hook around the edge of the scutum, how the attack angles differ from straight sword attacks, how the Murmillo must adjust his shield position and movement to defend effectively. The gladiators watch intently, memorizing the positions and movements. Then they pair up and begin practicing, each Murmillo working with a partner, one playing the role of Thrake's attacker while the other defends, then switching roles. They use wooden training weapons, exact replicas of combat weapons in size and weight, but without sharpened edges, allowing full force practice without the lethal consequences of real blades. Marcus pairs with another experienced Murmillo named Quintus. They have trained together for 3 years, have developed good timing and understanding, can push each other hard without causing injury. As Quintus attacks with the wooden seeker, Marcus adjusts his shield, moves to control the angle, attempts to catch the curved blade on the rim of his scutum where it cannot hook around. The training is intense and physically demanding. The repetition is endless, the same defensive position executed dozens of times, the same movement pattern drilled until it becomes automatic, the same tactical principle tested against varying attack speeds and angles. This is how muscle memory is built, how techniques become reflexive, how fighters develop the ability to respond correctly under the stress and chaos of actual combat. Crescens circulates among the pairs, observing, correcting, offering guidance. Marcus, your shield is dropping on the recovery. Keep it up. A low shield invites a head strike. To another fighter, don't retreat in a straight line. Move laterally, create angles, force him to adjust his attack. To a third, good timing on that counter, but commit more to the strike. In the arena, half-committed attacks waste opportunities. As the morning training session progresses, sweat soaks through the gladiators' tunics. Their breathing becomes labored, their muscles begin to burn from the sustained effort. But the training continues relentlessly. Crescens drives them hard, knowing that thorough training is what keeps them alive in the arena, that the difference between survival and death often comes down to technique executed correctly under extreme pressure. Around mid-morning, Crescens calls a brief rest. The gladiators drink water from barrels placed around the arena, catch their breath, stretch tired muscles, but the rest is brief, perhaps 10 minutes, before training resumes with a different focus. Now the Murmilones practice offensive techniques, how to create openings in the Thrax's defense, how to use the scutum not just for defense, but as an offensive weapon to bash and unbalance opponents, how to close distance safely against the longer reach that the Seeker provides when used skillfully. Marcus practices a shield rush, charging forward behind his scutum, driving into the opponent's space, using the shield's mass to create impact and disruption, following immediately with a sword thrust aimed at the now unbalanced opponent. The technique requires precise timing and commitment. If executed poorly, it leaves the attacker exposed. But when done correctly, it is devastatingly effective. As noon approaches and the sun climbs higher, making the training arena uncomfortably hot, Crescens finally calls an end to the morning session. The gladiators are exhausted, their bodies depleted by 4 hours of intense physical training. They file back to the barracks area, where they will rest during the hottest part of the day, before resuming training in the late afternoon. But before dismissing them, Crescens offers final words. Remember, in the arena, everything we practice here becomes real. The wooden swords become sharp steel. The practice partners become opponents trying to kill you. The spectators demand blood and death. The training we do now is what stands between you and death in the sand. Take it seriously. Your lives depend on it. The gladiators bow to their doctor, acknowledging the lesson, then disperse to seek rest, food, and whatever small pleasures the ludus allows. Marcus returns to his cell, strips off his sweat-soaked tunic, and lies on his bed, his muscles aching, his mind reviewing the morning's lessons. He has survived 12 arena fights, but he knows that each one could be his last, that all his training and skill provide no guarantee of survival, only the best chance he can have in an inherently deadly profession. After the midday rest period, training resumes in the late afternoon, when the worst heat is past and the gladiators have recovered some energy. This session focuses on weapon-specific training, developing the particular skills required for each gladiatorial class's unique equipment and combat style. Let us now follow a different gladiator named Lucius Septimus, a retiarius, one of the most distinctive and controversial types of gladiator. The retiarius fights nearly naked, wearing only a loincloth and a shoulder guard on the left arm, wielding a trident, a weighted net, and a dagger, facing armored opponents who possess superior protection but less mobility. Lucius is 23 years old and has been training as a retiarius for 2 years. He is a volunteer, a free man who chose gladiatorial combat after a failed attempt at a merchant career left him bankrupt. He chose the retiarius class partly because it matched his physical attributes. He is tall and lean, with exceptional speed and agility, and partly because successful retiarii can earn substantial prize money due to the high risk and dramatic nature of their fights. The retiarius training area is separate from where the heavy infantry gladiators, like the Myrmilones, train. Here, the doctor is a former retiarius named Gaius Petronius, who won his freedom after 15 arena victories and now trains others in the specialized techniques this unique fighting style requires. The net is everything. Petronius begins the lesson, addressing the 10 retiarii in his group. Without the net, you are a nearly naked man with a trident, facing an armored opponent with sword and shield. The net is your primary weapon, your first line of offense and defense, the tool that creates the opportunities for your trident to strike. He demonstrates net throwing technique, showing the proper grip, the spinning motion that opens the net, the timing of the release that sends it flying toward the target. The net is weighted at its edges with small lead balls, giving it momentum and helping it spread in flight, designed to entangle an opponent's weapons, shield, or body. Lucius and the other retiarii practice net throwing for an extended period, casting their nets at wooden posts representing opponents, retrieving them, casting again, over and over. The technique is more complex than it appears. The net must be thrown with enough force to reach the target, but not so much force that it passes beyond. It must spread properly in flight, which requires correct spinning technique. It must be aimed to anticipate the opponent's movement, not where he is now, but where he will be when the net arrives. After dozens of throws, Lucius's right shoulder burns from the repetitive motion. His fingers are sore from gripping the net's rope, but Petronius demands more. You may need to throw multiple times. Your first throw might miss. Your opponent might dodge or deflect it. You must be able to cast repeatedly without fatigue degrading your accuracy. The training progresses to more complex scenarios. Now the targets move. Assistants holding shields and swords, playing the roles as secutores, the gladiator type specifically designed to fight retiarii, advancing and retreating, forcing the retiarii to time their casts against moving opponents. Lucius faces a training partner, advancing behind a large shield. He backs away, maintaining distance, looking for the moment to cast. The secutor charges suddenly, closing distance rapidly. Lucius casts the net in a sweeping motion, aiming low to catch the opponent's legs. The net spreads, descends, but the secutor dodges at the last moment, and the net hits the sand harmlessly. "Too predictable," Petronius calls out. "You telegraphed the throw. Your shoulder dipped before you cast. A trained opponent will read that signal and evade. Keep your upper body motion minimal until the actual release." They reset and try again. This time, Lucius maintains better body control, but his cast is rushed, and the net doesn't spread properly. Again. This time the spread is good, but the aim is off. Again, and again, and again. This is the reality of gladiator training. Endless repetition, constant correction, the slow accumulation of skill through practice that is simultaneously boring and demanding. There are no shortcuts, no quick paths to competence. Only hours and weeks and months of doing the same things over and over until they become automatic. After net practice, the training shifts to the trident. This is not the decorative prop that popular imagination sometimes envisions, but a serious weapon, a 6-foot shaft tipped with 3 sharp prongs, used for both thrusting and for controlling distance. The trident allows the retiarius to keep armored opponents at bay, to threaten from beyond sword range, to create the space needed for net casting. Lucius practices thrusting techniques, working against a training partner with a shield. The trident's 3 prongs create multiple threat points. An opponent defending against one prong may be struck by another. But the weapon also has limitations. It is relatively light compared to heavier spears, it can be grabbed or deflected more easily than a blade, and it requires significant skill to use effectively. Petronius demonstrates advanced trident techniques, using the weapon to pin the opponent's shield to the ground, creating a moment of vulnerability, using the prongs to catch the opponent's sword, potentially disarming him, using the shaft to strike and push, creating space and disrupting the opponent's rhythm. The training is exhausting. Lucius's arms shake from holding the trident extended. His legs burn from the constant footwork required to maintain optimal distance from his opponent. But he persists, knowing that mastery of these techniques is literally a matter of life and death. The final weapon the retiarius trains with is the pugio, a dagger used as a backup weapon when the net has been lost or when combat moves to very close range. The dagger is a last resort, used in desperate circumstances. Petronius demonstrates dagger techniques, quick thrusts to gaps in armor, targeting the throat, armpits, groin, the few vulnerable points on a heavily armored opponent. The techniques are brutal and desperate, appropriate for the desperate circumstances in which they would be used. As the afternoon training session continues, Petronius creates more complex scenarios, combining all the retiarius weapons and testing the gladiator's ability to transition between them fluidly. Lucius practices casting the net, and when it misses or is evaded, immediately transitioning to the trident to keep the opponent at bay while retrieving the net. He practices what to do when the opponent closes inside trident range, dropping the long weapon and drawing the dagger, fighting at close quarters against an armored foe. These scenarios are as close to actual arena conditions as training can provide. They are chaotic, unpredictable, demanding constant decision-making under pressure. They teach not just technique, but also tactical thinking, how to assess situations quickly, how to adapt when plans fail, how to maintain composure when facing skilled opponents trying to kill you. Elsewhere in the ludus, other gladiator types are receiving similarly specialized training. The Thraces practice with their curved sika and small shields, learning to use mobility and unorthodox attack angles to overcome opponents with superior armor. The heavily armored myrmillonos and secutors drill in formation fighting and in using their equipment's defensive advantages. The hoplomachus, gladiators equipped similarly to Greek hoplites with spear, sword, and round shield, practice phalanx-style combat techniques adapted to arena fighting. The demarcheri practice fighting with 2 swords simultaneously, a flashy but demanding style that requires exceptional coordination. The equites practice mounted combat, though their fights typically begin on horseback and transition to foot combat after the opening exchanges. Each type requires different training, different skills, different tactical approaches. The ludus must maintain expertise in all these styles, must have doctores qualified to teach each specialization, must provide appropriate equipment and training facilities for the diverse combat methods the arena demands. As the afternoon wanes and the training session concludes, the gladiators are utterly exhausted. They have trained for approximately 7 or 8 hours total, with only the midday rest period providing respite. Their bodies are battered from falls and impacts, their muscles depleted from sustained exertion, their hands blistered from gripping weapons. But this is the daily routine, repeated 6 days per week, with only one rest day. The training is relentless because the arena is unforgiving. A gladiator who is not in peak condition, who has not drilled techniques to the point of reflexive mastery, who cannot perform under extreme stress, such a gladiator will likely die in his first or second fight. Lucius makes his way to the baths, a facility within the Ludus complex where gladiators can clean themselves and soak tired muscles in warm water. The baths are not as elaborate as the public baths that free Roman citizens enjoy, but they are adequate, providing basic cleanliness and some relief for aching bodies. As he soaks in the warm water, Lucius reflects on his choice to become a gladiator. It was desperation that drove him here, bankruptcy and the prospect of debtor's prison or worse. But now, he is trapped in a profession where the only escapes are death, permanent injury, or the almost impossible achievement of winning enough fights to earn freedom and prize money. He has fought in the arena twice so far, winning both bouts. The first was against a poorly trained opponent, more execution than contest, and Lucius dispatched him quickly with a net cast, followed by a trident thrust to the throat. The second was against a skilled secutor, a brutal fight that lasted nearly 10 minutes and left Lucius with a deep cut across his ribs, and the secutor bleeding out in the sand from a trident wound to the thigh that severed an artery. He survived both fights, but he knows that survival is never guaranteed. He has seen skilled gladiators die in the arena, has watched friends and training partners bleed out in the sand, has witnessed the casual cruelty of crowds demanding death for fallen fighters who fought bravely but lost. This knowledge, that death is always possible, that each fight might be his last, shadows every day of training. But the training itself provides structure, purpose, even a kind of satisfaction. Lucius takes pride in his developing skills, in the respect he earns from his doctores and fellow gladiators, in the small victories of executing techniques correctly, of improving his timing and accuracy, of becoming a more complete fighter. As he leaves the baths and returns to the barracks to the evening meal, Lucius knows that tomorrow will bring more training, more repetition, more physical punishment in service of developing the skills that might keep him alive. It is a brutal existence, but it is the existence he chose, and he will pursue it with all the dedication and skill he can muster, hoping that his training, his speed, and his luck will be enough to survive the deadly profession of arena combat. Effective combat requires not just technique, but also superior physical conditioning, strength, endurance, speed, and the ability to perform under extreme stress. The Ludus dedicates considerable time and resources to developing gladiators' physical capabilities through systematic conditioning programs and carefully managed diets. Let us observe a conditioning session led by a trainer named Marcus Aurelius Lupus, a former soldier who now works at the Ludus Magnus, training gladiators in the physical fundamentals that underlie combat effectiveness. It is early morning before the weapons training begins, and a group of newer gladiators, men who have been at the Ludus for less than 6 months, and who are still developing basic fitness before advancing to specialized combat training, are assembled in the training ground for conditioning work. Combat is as much about endurance as about skill, Lupus begins. You can have perfect technique, but if you tire after 2 minutes, you will die. The arena demands that you fight at high intensity for as long as necessary, sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes 20. You must condition your bodies to sustain that intensity. The conditioning program begins with running. The gladiators circle the training arena at a steady pace, lap after lap, while Lupus watches and calls out encouragement and criticism. Keep your pace steady. This is not a sprint. This is building the base endurance that allows you to fight without exhausting. After perhaps 30 minutes of running, the gladiators are breathing hard, but not yet completely exhausted. Now Lupus introduces interval training, short bursts of maximum effort, followed by brief recovery periods. Sprint to that marker and back. Move. The gladiators explode into sprints, their leg muscles burning, their lungs gasping for air. After completing the sprint, they get perhaps 30 seconds to catch their breath before the next sprint. This pattern repeats, sprint, recover, until the gladiators are completely exhausted. their legs trembling, their breathing ragged. This type of training develops the anaerobic capacity required for the explosive, high-intensity efforts that characterize combat. After running intervals, the training shifts to strength work. The gladiators perform exercises with heavy stones, lifting them, carrying them, throwing them. They perform push-ups and pull-ups using the wooden equipment installed around the training ground. They work in pairs to wrestle and grapple, developing the functional strength needed to control opponents in close combat. One particular exercise involves heavy wooden swords, training weapons deliberately made heavier than combat weapons. The gladiators execute cutting motions with these heavy implements, building the specific strength required for sustained sword work. After dozens of cuts with the heavy training sword, switching to a normal weight combat sword feels effortless, allowing faster, more powerful strikes. Lupus also incorporates agility training, rapid footwork drills, direction changes, movements that develop balance and coordination. Gladiators must be able to move quickly in any direction, to change direction suddenly to evade attacks or create attack angles, to maintain balance on the unpredictable surface of arena sand. The conditioning session is brutal, pushing the gladiators to their physical limits, demanding effort that leaves them completely exhausted. But this is deliberate. Combat is exhausting, and gladiators must be conditioned to perform effectively even when tired, even when their bodies are screaming for rest, even when every instinct urges them to stop. In the arena, you cannot stop because you are tired, Lupus tells them. When you feel you cannot continue, you must continue anyway, because stopping means death. We push you beyond your limits in training so that in the arena you can push beyond them when your life depends on it. As important as conditioning is diet, the ludus carefully manages what gladiators eat, providing nutrition designed to build strength and support the demands of training, while keeping costs manageable and preventing the fighters from becoming too heavy or slow. The gladiator diet is primarily vegetarian, built around barley, beans, and vegetables, supplemented with smaller amounts of meat, cheese, and fish. This diet might seem austere compared to the meat-rich diets that modern people associate with athletes, but it is actually quite nutritious and well-suited to the gladiators' needs. Barley is a staple. Gladiators are sometimes called horderii, barley men, in reference to the large amounts of barley they consume. Barley provides complex carbohydrates for energy, fiber for digestive health, and is cheaper than wheat, making it economical for feeding large numbers of gladiators. Beans, particularly lentils and chickpeas, provide protein for muscle development and repair. Vegetables supply vitamins and minerals. The diet occasionally includes meat, particularly pork and chicken, providing additional protein and fat. Cheese and olive oil contribute fats and calories. The food is plain but substantial. A typical breakfast might be barley porridge with honey, bread, and watered wine. Lunch might be bean stew with vegetables, more bread, and cheese. Dinner might feature barley again, perhaps mixed with meat or fish, along with cooked vegetables and fruit when available. The quantities are generous. The lanista ensures his gladiators receive sufficient calories to support their training. Undernourished gladiators would not develop properly, would not be able to train intensively, would not command high fees in the arena. It is in the lanista's financial interest to feed his fighters well, but the diet is also carefully balanced to prevent excessive weight gain. Gladiators must be strong and fit, but also mobile and quick. Excess body fat slows movement and decreases endurance. The diet provides adequate nutrition without excessive calories, keeping fighters lean and athletic. Some historical evidence suggests that gladiators consumed a special drink made from vinegar and ash, believed to strengthen bones. Modern analysis has confirmed that this drink would indeed provide calcium and other minerals that support bone health, important for men who regularly experience impacts and falls. Medical care is another crucial component of gladiator training. The ludus employs physicians who treat injuries, manage illnesses, and ensure fighters remain healthy enough to train and compete. Let us visit the medical facility, located in a dedicated building within the ludus complex, where a physician named Quintus Claudius Hemeros treats a gladiator who suffered a training injury. The injured gladiator, a Thraex named Gaius, has a deep cut on his forearm from a training accident, where a wooden weapon splintered and created a sharp edge that slashed his arm. The wound is bleeding steadily and needs treatment. Hemerops examines the wound carefully, cleaning it with wine. The Romans understand that wine has antiseptic properties, though they do not understand the underlying mechanism of preventing infection. He determines that the wound requires stitching to close properly. Using a curved needle and thread made from animal sinew, Hemeros stitches the wound closed with practiced efficiency. The procedure is painful. There is no anesthetic beyond wine to dull the pain, but Gaius endures stoically, knowing that proper treatment now prevents worse complications later. After stitching, Hemeros applies a poultice made from herbs believed to promote healing and prevent infection, a mixture that likely includes ingredients with genuine medicinal properties, along with elements that are more superstitious than effective. He wraps the wound in clean linen bandages and instructs Gaius to keep it clean and dry, to return daily for bandage changes, and to avoid using that arm in training until the wound heals. "How long until I can train again?" Gaius asks. "At least 2 weeks for the wound to close sufficiently. Another week or 2 before you should train at full intensity. Be patient. Rushing back to training before healing is complete risks reopening the wound or causing infection that could permanently damage the arm." This medical care is sophisticated for the ancient world. The Ludus physicians have considerable experience treating combat injuries, have developed techniques for managing wounds and fractures, understand nutrition and conditioning, and can often save fighters who would die without treatment. But the care is also pragmatic and economic. The Lannister invests substantial resources in acquiring and training gladiators. A gladiator represents a significant financial asset. Purchasing a slave suitable for gladiatorial training costs money. Feeding and housing him costs money. Training him takes time and resources. Once trained, a skilled gladiator can earn substantial fees for the Lannister when hired out for games. Protecting this investment requires keeping gladiators healthy, treating injuries promptly, preventing minor problems from becoming serious ones. The medical care is good, not primarily from humanitarian concern, but from financial self-interest, though individual physicians like Hemeros often develop genuine care for the fighters they treat. As the afternoon wanes and training concludes for the day, the gladiators gather for the evening meal, another substantial serving of barley, beans, and vegetables, with perhaps some meat or fish for variety. They eat heartily, replenishing the calories burned during training, fueling the recovery and adaptation that will make tomorrow's training possible. After eating, they have a few hours of free time before sleep. Some spend this time in the baths, soaking tired muscles. Some socialize with other gladiators, forming the bonds of friendship that make the brutal life more bearable. Some practice additional training on their own, working on techniques they struggled with during the day. Some simply rest, trying to recover before tomorrow brings another round of demanding training. The life is hard, the work is relentless, the future is uncertain. But the training provides structure, the diet provides sustenance, the medical care provides relief from injuries, and together, these systems create an environment where men can develop the extraordinary skills and conditioning required to survive in the arena. Physical training and technical skill are necessary for gladiatorial combat, but they are not sufficient. Fighting to the death requires mental preparation, psychological conditioning, the development of attributes like courage, aggression, and the ability to function under extreme stress.
The doctores understand this, and gladiator training includes deliberate efforts to develop the mental aspects of combat
alongside the physical and technical aspects. Let us observe a training session focused specifically on psychological preparation, conducted by a senior doctor named Tiberius Cornelius Rufus, a veteran of 34 arena fights who understands the mental dimension of combat from extensive personal experience. Rufus gathers a group of gladiators who will soon face their first arena fights, young men who have completed their basic training, who possess adequate technical skills, but who have not yet experienced real combat with real weapons against opponents actually trying to kill them. "Fear is natural," Rufus begins. "Every gladiator feels fear before entering the arena. Even veterans with dozens of fights. The question is not whether you will be afraid, but whether you can control your fear, can prevent it from paralyzing you, can fight effectively despite it." He describes the experience of arena combat, the noise of the crowd, the heat and brightness of sunlight reflecting off sand, the weight of armor and weapons, the sight of your opponent entering from the opposite gate, the knowledge that one of you will likely be dead or dying within the next few minutes. Your heart will race, your breathing will become rapid, your hands may tremble. These are normal fear responses, your body preparing for life or death struggle. You must not fight these responses, but must channel them into focused intensity. Rufus teaches breathing techniques designed to manage fear responses, slow, deep breaths that activate the body's calming mechanisms, that override the panic breathing that can lead to hyperventilation and loss of control. The gladiators practice these breathing patterns, learning to slow their heart rates deliberately, to maintain mental clarity despite physiological stress. He also teaches mental rehearsal techniques, visualizing the upcoming fight, imagining various scenarios and their responses, mentally practicing techniques and tactics so thoroughly that they become automatic even under stress. Before each of my fights, I would sit quietly and visualize the combat, Rufus explains. I would imagine my opponent's attack patterns, would mentally practice my responses, would rehearse successful techniques. This mental practice supplements physical practice, programming your mind to respond correctly when the actual situation arises. The gladiators practice this mental rehearsal, visualizing themselves in the arena, imagining opponents attacking, mentally executing defensive techniques and counterattacks. It feels strange at first, using imagination as a training tool, but Rufus assures them that mental practice has real value, that the brain does not distinguish sharply between vividly imagined experiences and actual experiences, that mental rehearsal builds neural pathways just as physical practice does. Rufus also addresses the psychological impact of killing. Many gladiators struggle with this aspect of arena combat, the requirement to kill another human being, often someone you have trained with, someone you know personally, someone who is not your enemy, but simply another professional doing his job. Killing in the arena is not murder, Rufus explains, offering the rationalization that allows gladiators to live with what they do. It is professional combat, agreed to by both parties, governed by rules, performed for a legitimate purpose. Your opponent knows the risks just as you do. He would kill you without hesitation if given the opportunity. You are not killing a friend, but defeating an opponent in professional combat. This framing is psychologically necessary. Gladiators who cannot rationalize their actions, who are consumed by guilt after killing, often develop psychological problems that interfere with future performance, or that drive them to despair and suicide. But Rufus also acknowledges the human cost. Some opponents you will feel nothing about killing. Criminals, arrogant fools, men who give you genuine cause to hate them. Others you will regret killing. Brave opponents who fought well, men you respected, sometimes friends from your own ludus. This regret is human and acceptable, but you cannot let it paralyze you. You must be able to kill when necessary, regardless of your feelings, because the alternative is your own death. The training session includes desensitization exercises, graduated exposure to combat-related stimuli, designed to reduce fear responses and increase comfort with violence. The gladiators observe experienced fighters sparring at full intensity with training weapons, getting used to the speed and violence of real combat. They witness medical procedures, seeing wounds treated, becoming familiar with blood and injury. Some training includes fighting against opponents wearing real armor rather than training gear, experiencing the psychological impact of facing a fully equipped opponent. One particularly intense exercise involves fighting with sharper training weapons than usual, not fully combat sharp, but sharp enough to cut if contact is made with force. The gladiators wear light armor during this exercise, and the fighting is controlled to prevent serious injury, but the presence of real cutting edges adds psychological realism, creates genuine fear of being cut, forces fighters to defend seriously rather than accepting hits that would be harmless with wooden weapons. Rufus also teaches aggression management, how to access and channel aggressive emotions that enhance combat performance, while avoiding the loss of control that leads to tactical errors. Controlled aggression is a weapon, he explains. You must be able to access intense aggressive emotion that fuels powerful attacks and overcomes inhibitions against violence. But you must also maintain tactical awareness, must not become so consumed by aggression that you abandon technique and strategy. This is a delicate balance, being aggressive enough to fight effectively, while remaining controlled enough to fight intelligently. Some gladiators naturally possess this balance. Others must work to develop it, learning to ramp up aggression when needed while maintaining mental control. The psychological training also addresses dealing with pain and injury. Gladiators will be hit, will be cut, will suffer injuries during fights. They must be able to continue fighting despite pain, must not panic when wounded, must maintain effectiveness even when injured.
Rufus describes techniques for managing pain, mental distance from the pain sensation, focusing attention elsewhere, using the adrenaline of combat to suppress pain temporarily. He also teaches tactical adjustments for fighting while injured, protecting wounded areas, adapting techniques to compensate for reduced capability, knowing when an injury is serious enough that surrender is the wisest choice. There is no shame in yielding when further combat would be futile, Rufus emphasizes. A gladiator who fights skillfully but loses to a superior opponent, who yields with courage when defeat is inevitable, will often receive mercy from the crowd and from the editor of the games. But a gladiator who continues fighting hopelessly when seriously injured, who cannot accept defeat, may die when he could have lived. This is important practical wisdom. Not all gladiatorial combats end in death. Gladiators who yield, raising a finger to signal surrender, often receive missio, dismissal, being allowed to leave the arena alive, especially if they fought bravely and entertained the crowd. The decision to yield requires psychological strength, accepting defeat, trusting in the mercy of the crowd, overriding the impulse to fight to the death. As the psychological training session concludes, Rufus offers final thoughts. The mind is your most important weapon. Technique and conditioning are essential, but they are useless if fear paralyzes you, if you cannot think clearly under stress, if you cannot make sound decisions in the chaos of combat. Develop your mental strength as diligently as you develop your physical strength, and you will have the best chance of surviving the arena. The gladiators reflect on these lessons as they return to their routine activities. The psychological dimension of gladiatorial combat is less tangible than physical skills, but no less important. A gladiator with perfect technique who cannot control his fear will lose to a less skilled opponent who remains mentally composed. A gladiator who cannot access aggressive intensity will fight tentatively and lose. A gladiator who cannot manage pain and injury will panic when wounded. The psychological training, like the physical and technical training, is an essential component of preparing men for the extraordinary demands of fighting to the death for public entertainment. It is training that most modern people cannot truly understand. We do not face mortal combat, do not need to develop the mental attributes required to kill and risk being killed. But for Roman gladiators, this psychological conditioning was as necessary as learning to wield a sword, and the doctores who understood this trained the mind as rigorously as they trained the body. The culmination of gladiator training is live combat practice, sparring sessions where gladiators fight each other with training weapons at near full intensity, testing their skills against resisting opponents, experiencing the chaos and pressure of actual combat in conditions as close to arena fighting as training safety allows. Let us observe a sparring session where experienced gladiators face each other in simulated combat under the supervision of their doctores and before an audience of trainers, newer gladiators, and occasionally paying spectators who visit the ludus to watch training. Two gladiators are preparing to spar: Marcus Attilius, the Murmillo we met earlier, and a retiarius named Caius Aurelius. This matchup represents one of the classic gladiatorial pairings, the heavily armored Murmillo with sword and shield against the lightly equipped but mobile neckfighter. They are equipped with their full kit, though modified for training safety. Marcus wears his Murmillo armor, a heavy bronze helmet with wide brim and decorative fish crest, a large rectangular shield, scutum, an arm guard, manica, on his sword arm, a greave, metal shin guard on his left leg. His weapon is a wooden gladius, the same weight and balance as a real sword, but without the cutting edge. Caius is nearly naked by comparison, wearing only a loincloth and a shoulder guard, gallerus, protecting his left shoulder and the side of his neck. His weapons are a training trident with blunted points, a weighted net, and a training dagger. The disparity in protection is deliberate. The Murmillo's armor provides superior defense, but also reduces mobility, while the retiarius relies on speed and distance management to avoid being hit. The doctor overseeing this bout is the experienced Crescens, who will judge the combat, call penalties for improper technique or excessive force, and stop the bout if injury risk becomes too great. The two gladiators face each other across the training arena, perhaps 15 feet apart. Around the arena's perimeter, perhaps 50 spectators watch, other gladiators, trainers, guards, and a few wealthy Romans who have paid to observe training at the prestigious Ludus Magnus. "Begin," Crescens calls. The fighters immediately begin moving. Caius circles to his right, maintaining distance, holding his trident extended to keep Marcus at bay. Marcus advances behind his shield, watching for an opening, trying to close the distance that advantages the retirees. Caius makes a probing thrust with the trident, not a committed attack, but a test, seeing how Marcus responds. Marcus deflects the trident with his shield, continues advancing. Caius backs away, maintaining distance, circling laterally. This initial phase might appear cautious or even boring to the untrained eye, but it is crucial. Both fighters are assessing each other, watching for patterns, looking for tactical advantages. Caius needs to maintain distance long enough to deploy his net effectively. Marcus needs to close to sword range without being caught in the net or impaled on the trident. Suddenly, Caius commits. He casts his net in a spreading throw aimed at Marcus's upper body and shield. Marcus reacts instantly, raising his shield and turning his body, trying to make himself a smaller target. The net passes over his shield, a near miss, and Caius immediately closes distance with his trident, thrusting at the now exposed lower body. But Marcus has anticipated this combination. As the net misses, he drives forward with his shield, using it like a battering ram, meeting Caius's advance with superior mass and momentum. The shield impacts Caius's shoulder guard with significant force, staggering the lighter fighter. Marcus follows immediately with a sword thrust aimed at Caius's exposed torso, but Caius manages to deflect the wooden blade with his trident shaft, then retreats rapidly, creating distance again. Both fighters reset, breathing hard from the intense exchange. Good combinations on both fighters, Crescens calls out. Caius, good net cast and follow-up. Marcus, excellent shield charge and immediate exploitation. Reset and continue. The bout continues through several more exchanges. Caius attempts another net cast. This time Marcus dodges rather than blocking, and the net misses entirely. Without his primary weapon, Caius must rely on the trident alone, and Marcus presses the advantage, forcing Caius to fight defensively while he retrieves the net. But, as Marcus closes for a finishing attack, Caius executes a desperate maneuver, using the trident to hook Marcus's shield, pulling it down into the side, creating a momentary opening for a dagger thrust to the exposed side. In a real fight with real weapons, this thrust would have penetrated between Marcus's ribs, possibly killing him. With training weapons, the wooden dagger impacts Marcus's side forcefully, but without penetrating. Hold, Crescens calls. Mortal wound to the murmillo, point to Caius for the shield hook and dagger combination, well executed under pressure. The fighters pause, catching their breath. Marcus acknowledges the successful technique. He was so focused on pressing his advantage that he failed to protect against the shield manipulation. Caius acknowledges that he was fortunate. If Marcus had been slightly more cautious, the technique would not have worked. This kind of detailed analysis is standard in training bouts. Every exchange is examined, successful techniques are praised, errors are identified and discussed. This immediate feedback helps fighters learn from sparring, helps them understand what worked and what failed, accelerates skill development. After brief rest, the bout resumes. Now Marcus is more cautious about his shield, aware of the hooking technique. Caius has successfully retrieved his net and is looking for another opportunity to use it. The fight continues for another several minutes, with multiple exchanges, near successes, and recoveries by both fighters. Eventually, Crescens calls an end to the bout. Neither fighter has achieved a decisive victory, but both have demonstrated skill, both have tested themselves against a competent opponent, both have learned from the experience. Good work from both, Crescens concludes. Marcus, remember to protect your shield, don't become so focused on offense that you neglect defense. Caius, your net accuracy needs work. 2 casts, both misses. You cannot rely on trident alone against a skilled opponent. Work on your casting precision. These sparring sessions occur regularly, providing the most realistic training possible short of actual arena combat. They are essential for developing the real combat skills that kata and drilling alone cannot provide, the ability to read opponents, to adapt tactics in real time, to execute techniques under the stress and unpredictability of actual fighting. The intensity of sparring varies. Some sessions are conducted at reduced intensity, focusing on technical development without excessive injury risk. Other sessions, particularly for experienced fighters preparing for upcoming arena bouts, are conducted at near maximum intensity, with harder hits and more aggressive combat, that more closely simulates real fighting. Injuries from sparring are common: bruises, minor cuts, occasional fractures, or sprains. The doctors accept these as necessary costs of effective training. Gladiators cannot develop real combat skills without experiencing real combat pressure, and that pressure inevitably produces injuries. But the training weapons and protective modifications reduce serious injury rates. Wooden swords cause bruises and occasionally break bones, but they do not cut or penetrate as real swords do. Blunted tridents cause impact trauma, but rarely puncture. Training armor and padding provide additional protection. The result is training that is realistic enough to be valuable, but not so dangerous that fighters are regularly killed or permanently disabled. Some sparring sessions are organized as tournaments, with multiple gladiators competing in elimination format, winners advancing to face other winners. These tournaments allow gladiators to test themselves against various opponents, to experience the pressure of competitive combat, to develop the psychological toughness required for arena performance. The tournaments are also entertainment. Spectators enjoy watching skilled gladiators fight, even with training weapons, and the ludus sometimes invites wealthy patrons to observe these events, both as entertainment and as marketing, demonstrating the quality of fighters available for hire for actual games. As the sparring session concludes, and the fighters return to their other training or to rest, the value of this live combat practice is clear. No amount of kata practice or drilling can fully replicate the experience of fighting a resisting opponent who is actively trying to defeat you. Sparring provides that experience, builds the real combat skills that make the difference between survival and death in the arena. For gladiators, these training bouts are both preparation and preview. Preparation for the real fights that will determine their fates, and preview of what those real fights will be like, minus the sharp weapons and the certainty of death for the loser. The training is as close to the real thing as possible, and it is this realism that makes it effective, that transforms novice fighters into skilled gladiators ready to face the deadly reality of the arena. As a gladiator approaches his scheduled arena appearance, the final days of preparation are crucial, both physically and psychologically. Let us follow Marcus Attilius through the week before he is scheduled to fight in games celebrating the emperor's birthday, examining the final preparations, the psychological state of a man preparing for mortal combat, and the rituals and practices that mark this transition from training to actual fighting. The announcement comes 8 days before the games. Crescens informs Marcus that he has been selected to fight in the upcoming games at the Colosseum, that his opponent will be announced later, that he should prepare himself physically and mentally for combat. This news triggers complex emotions. There is pride. Being selected for major games at the Colosseum is an honor. A recognition of skill and successful performance could bring fame and reward. There is anxiety. Every arena fight carries the possibility of death or crippling injury. There is anticipation. The training and waiting will end, replaced by action and resolution. Marcus has fought in the arena 12 times previously, has survived each bout, but he knows that past success provides no guarantee of future survival. Each fight is its own test, and even the most skilled gladiator can be killed by a lucky strike, by equipment failure, by a moment's inattention. The training in the final week is modified. The intensity is actually reduced slightly. This is not the time to risk injury from overly aggressive sparring or to exhaust the body with excessive conditioning. Instead, the focus is on maintaining readiness, on polishing techniques, on mental preparation. Marcus practices his core techniques daily, but with shorter sessions and more rest. He works on specific scenarios he might face, visualizes various combat situations, mentally rehearses his responses. He maintains his conditioning with moderate exercise, but avoids anything that might cause injury or excessive fatigue. 4 days before the fight, the announcement is made public. The program for the games is posted throughout Rome, and Marcus learns his opponent's identity. He will face a Thrax named Quintus Fabricius, a veteran of 18 fights, a skilled and dangerous opponent known for aggressive tactics and unorthodox attack angles. Marcus has sparred against Thraces many times in training and is familiar with their techniques and tactics, but Fabricius is reputedly exceptional, and Marcus knows this will be a serious test. He spends the next days studying everything he can learn about Fabricius, asking other gladiators who have fought him or watched his bouts, reviewing his known tactics and tendencies, planning counter-strategies. The diet in the final days is carefully managed. Marcus eats well,
but avoids heavy foods that might make him sluggish. He drinks water liberally to ensure good hydration. He avoids alcohol, which some gladiators use to calm nerves, but which can affect performance. Sleep becomes difficult as the fight approaches. Marcus lies awake at night, his mind racing with thoughts of the upcoming combat, imagining scenarios, worrying about outcomes. This is normal. Few gladiators sleep well in the nights before fighting, but he tries to rest as much as possible, knowing that fatigue degrades performance. 2 days before the fight, the gladiators who will participate in the games are given a special banquet, the Cena Libera, the free meal, where they can eat and drink whatever they wish, where friends and family can visit, where they are treated as honored guests rather than as slaves or prisoners. The Cena Libera serves multiple purposes. It is a gesture of respect, acknowledging the gladiators' courage and the service they provide through their combat. It is entertainment. Wealthy Romans enjoy attending these banquets, observing the gladiators who will soon fight, placing bets based on their observations. And it is potentially a final meal. For gladiators who will die in the arena, this is their last experience of normal social life. Marcus attends the Cena Libera with mixed feelings. The food is excellent, far better than the daily ludus diet, with elaborate dishes of meat, fish, pastries, wine. But his appetite is limited by anxiety, and he eats moderately, despite the abundance. He socializes with other gladiators, with trainers, with spectators who approach to ask questions or wish him luck. One wealthy patron approaches Marcus, introduces himself, explains that he has wagered substantial money on Marcus's victory, and wants to assess his condition and confidence. Marcus responds politely, projects confidence he does not entirely feel, accepts the patron's good wishes. This interaction is slightly degrading, being assessed like a horse before a race, but it is part of the gladiator's role. The night before the fight, sleep is merely impossible. Marcus lies in his cell, listening to the breathing of his cellmates, his mind unable to stop reviewing scenarios, tactics, possibilities. He tries the breathing techniques he learned, tries to clear his mind, but anxiety keeps pulling him back to thoughts of tomorrow. He thinks about death. 12 previous fights survived, but this could be the unlucky 13th. If he dies tomorrow, it will likely be in the sand of the Colosseum, before a crowd of 50,000 spectators, killed by a man he has never wronged, for the entertainment of people who care nothing about him. This possibility has always existed, but now it is immediate, perhaps hours away. But he also thinks about victory. If he wins, if he survives this fight, he will have 13 victories, will move closer to the 30 or 40 victories that might earn him the wooden sword, the rudis, that symbolizes freedom and retirement from gladiatorial combat. He will earn prize money from this high-profile fight. He will gain fame and reputation. These possibilities motivate him, help counter the fear. Morning arrives, the day of the games. Marcus rises, performs his usual morning routine, but everything feels different, weighted with significance. This is the day. Within hours, he will know whether he survives or dies. Breakfast is available, but Marcus eats little. His stomach is tight with anxiety, and he knows from experience that fighting on a full stomach is uncomfortable. He drinks water, preparing for the physical exertion ahead. The gladiators scheduled for the day's games are assembled and prepared. Their hair is groomed, their equipment is checked and rechecked. The lanista wants his gladiators to look impressive. The visual spectacle matters almost as much as the combat itself. Marcus dons his armor with the help of attendants. The bronze helmet, the manica on his right arm, the greave on his left leg, the balteus, a wide belt, around his waist. Each piece is familiar, worn in training dozens of times, but today it feels different, heavier, more significant. He receives his shield, the scutum, a large rectangular shield of layered wood, covered with leather and rimmed with metal. He receives his gladius, not a training weapon, but a real sword, sharp enough to cut through flesh and bone, capable of killing with a single well-placed thrust. The weight of the real sword in his hand is both familiar and strange. Familiar because it is the same weight and balance as the training weapons he has used thousands of times. Strange because this is the tool that will determine whether he lives or dies today, that will either save his life or fail to do so. The gladiators are led through the tunnel connecting the Ludus Magnus to the Colosseum. The tunnel is underground, protecting them from public view during the short journey.
Marcus walks in procession with perhaps 40 other gladiators scheduled for the day's bouts, each man silent with his own thoughts, each facing his own test. They emerge into the Hypogeum, the underground complex beneath the Colosseum's arena floor. Here they wait in holding cells, listening to the sounds from above, the roar of the crowd, the announcements of the game's sponsor, the preliminary events that precede the gladiatorial combats. Marcus can hear his heart pounding, can feel adrenaline surging through his system. His hands tremble slightly, a normal fear response that he has learned to accept and manage. He performs his breathing exercises, tries to maintain calm, reviews his tactics one final time. An attendant appears. "Murmillo Marcus Attilius, you're next. Prepare to enter." This is it. Marcus moves to the gate, the mechanism that will lift him to the arena floor. Other gladiators offer brief words. "Fight well. May fortune favor you." These traditional wishes from men who understand what he faces. The mechanism activates. Marcus rises on the platform, emerging from below into the blinding sunlight of the arena. The roar of the crowd crashes over him like a physical force, 50,000 voices cheering, shouting, a wall of sound that is overwhelming. He sees the vast amphitheater stretching around him, the tiers of seats filled with spectators, the awnings providing shade, the emperor's box where Trajan himself watches. He sees the arena floor covered with fresh sand, the surface where he will fight and possibly die. Across the arena, the opposite gate opens, and his opponent emerges, Quintus Fabricius, the Thrakes, armed with curved sword and small shield, advancing with the confidence of a veteran fighter. The announcer proclaims their names and records to the crowd. The crowd reacts, cheering for favorites, shouting encouragement or insults. But Marcus barely hears. His attention is narrowing, focusing entirely on the opponent, approaching across the sand. All the training, all the preparation, all the years of practice, everything comes down to this moment. Professional fighters, approaching each other with the intent to kill. One will likely survive, one will likely die, and thousands of spectators will cheer regardless of which outcome occurs. Marcus adopts his stance, shield raised, sword ready, weight balanced. Fabricius mirrors him, taking the Thracian stance, curved blade position to hook and cut. They circle, measuring distance, watching for the first move. This is what gladiatorial training prepares men for, this moment of truth, when technique and conditioning and mental preparation are all tested simultaneously, under maximum pressure. All the hours of practice, all the sparring sessions, all the physical conditioning, all the psychological preparation. All of it exists to give Marcus the best possible chance of surviving the next few minutes. The fight will be decided by skill and conditioning and mental toughness, by the training both men have received, by their ability to execute under extreme stress. But it will also be influenced by chance, by small variations in footing, by momentary distractions, by equipment performing as expected or failing unexpectedly, by 1,000 small factors that can determine life or death. Marcus knows all this. He has trained for this. He is as prepared as he can be. Now he must fight, must trust his training, must execute the techniques he has practiced thousands of times, must be decisive when opportunity appears, and defensive when threatened. The crowd's noise fades to background as Marcus's focus narrows to total concentration on his opponent. This is what he has trained for. This is what all gladiators train for. The moment when training becomes reality, when practice becomes mortal combat, when the result determines not just victory or defeat, but life or death. And as the two fighters begin their deadly dance in the blood-soaked sand of the Colosseum, before a crowd that will cheer their combat and forget their names moments later, we understand the brutal reality that gladiatorial training prepared men for, not the romanticized version of cinema, but the actual historical practice of training humans to kill each other for entertainment, of developing in men the skills and mental attributes required to face death with courage, of creating fighters who could perform under ultimate pressure in one of the most demanding and deadly professions in human history. The training was sophisticated, systematic, physically demanding, psychologically intense, and remarkably effective at producing skilled fighters. But it was all in service of a brutal spectacle, of entertainment built on death, of a cultural practice that viewed human combat as public amusement. This was the reality of gladiatorial training, impressive in its sophistication, horrifying in its purpose, revealing in what it tells us about Roman culture and about the extremes of human violence and human capability.